Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Jeff Melanoff. We got some things to talk about that I thought we would never talk about because they usually don't happen. So, well, actually, this is the first time. This is the worst thing that's ever happened in his coaching career with this certain team. Well, I'll just go right into it. Steve Kerr, the coach of the Golden State Warriors, had his worst loss of his coaching career with the Warriors as they lost pretty handily and embarrassingly 128-95, a 33-point just whooping by Celtics over the Golden State Warriors, which can only mean one thing. It's a sign of the apocalypse. We need to all get into shelter. The Warriors had lost big time. I don't know what this means. I honestly have already packed up some dry food, and I've already made a base down in Nebraska where no one ever goes. So, well, now I just gave away my position. It's not in Nebraska. Well, now I have to find a new place. Now I got to make some phone calls. But regardless, I don't like what this means for the world. The Warriors have lost. And in a pretty decisive fashion, they were very bad from the three line. Kevin Durant made no threes. Steph made 4 of 10. And it just was not a good game in general. I mean, Curry only had 23 points. I know that's actually good for some people, but not for him. That's pretty average. And then you look at the worst of the worst comes from DeMarcus Cousins, as he just had a trouble getting anything going, and he actually eventually just started shoving people. He was trying to post up, and the guy kind of flopped. I think Bynes kind of flopped a little bit, and Cousins got into his face and quit flopping, and then Tatum tried to get him back away from his teammate, and then DeMarcus took exception to that and shoved him, and then I forget who else. There was someone else that came into the fray, and he shoved him too. And then the worst part is, after he did that, he put his hands up like, I didn't do anything. Like, I was defending myself. Like, you are the one that instigated everything that just happened. And so he obviously got in trouble for that, But that really just kind of was like how the Warriors were in a nutshell, just completely frustrated and flabbergasted and just could not get anything going. And when a Warriors team gets under 100 points in general is impressive for the Celtics to take that win. And the game really was about Gordon Hayward because he had 30 points off the bench. Great performance by him. This is probably his best performance since his unfortunate injury that happened last year in the first game of the season. So nice to see that come back from him. And his and this might be a sign of things to come for him, who knows, but that's just a good thing in general when you see someone with that brutal of an injury come back and play very well in a game against a very talented and arguably, well, I don't think there's any argument that the Warriors are the best team in the NBA. So coming off a 30-point game against them is an accomplishment without question. And just holding them to under 100 points is an accomplishment. Just how consistently they shoot the ball and how consistently they score, not just from beyond the arc, but down low and just anywhere on the court they can score, they will. They're just that good of an offensive team. Their defense obviously did not translate all the defense translated to their offense how bad they were because they let up 128 points to their 95. So obviously not a lot of good things happened there. So the question remains, like, with how they lost, the question is, will this affect the rest of their season? Let's face it, there's probably a 99% chance that's not going to affect where they are. They're still going to be first in the Western Conference going into the end of the season. They're probably still going to make it to the finals and go for their three-peat against either the Bucks or the Raptors or maybe the Philadelphia 76ers. It's unknown where that's going to go, but we'll see how everything turns out with that. But when it comes down to, is this the tipping point of the Warriors being great? Let's face it, probably not. They're still going to be good for a long, long time. And they just really don't have a sign of slowing down. And this was just a minor speed bump in the Golden State Warriors era of dominance. That's just how it goes. And with that, I only say that because of the fact that, it's just like I think everyone wishes there was some sort of unpredictability when it comes to the outcome of the NBA finals and who's going to come out on top. But I hate to really say this, but I've said this before, maybe on this show, maybe not on this show, but the NBA is one of the most predictable leagues in all of sports. And people are like, oh, the NFL is. The Patriots keep getting in the Super Bowl. Yeah, but there was at least a 10-year span from their one Super Bowl to another where, they were continuing to qualify for the Super Bowl or something of that nature, but there were other teams they were playing that won between Super Bowl 42, where they went to the Super Bowl in the undefeated season, and Super Bowl 46, where they lost to the Giants again. There was Super Bowl 43 with the Steelers winning, then it was the Saints winning, then it was the Packers winning, then it was Giants again. That 46 but 47 was the Ravens, 48 was the Broncos, then 49 was the Patriots yet again. So, but in the NBA, we've seen, let's just go from 2000 to now. 2000 and 2002, the Lakers won. And 2003, the Spurs won. Then the one-time champion Pistons win in 2004. And then 2005, the Spurs won again. Then in 2006, Miami wins with, what's-his-face? Shaq coming into the lead team. 2007, once again, the Spurs won. Then in 2008, the Celtics win, but that was their 16th title. In 2009, LA. 2010, LA again. 2011, the unpredictability of the Dallas Mavericks winning. That's fun. But then it goes all downhill from there. 2012 and 2013, Miami Heat. They go to their 3 straight, win 2 in a row. Then it's the Spurs again in 2014. Then it's the Warriors going to 4 straight finals against the Cleveland Cavaliers, who went to 4 straight finals. How is that fun? I'm serious. I'm not a hater of either of these teams. I'm fine. They play great. They especially the Warriors. They made that team. They drafted all those players. Some players came from another team, sure, but the front office, bravo to them for drafting Steph Curry, for drafting Draymond Green, for drafting Klay Thompson in that amazing trio that led to all these other great players coming in and building a dynasty. I get that. I respect that. But when you're thinking about the league, I know the league is at its highest point viewership-wise and popularity-wise, but just as a fan of sports, it's really disappointing to me to see it be the same thing over and over again. It's that infamous, do you know the definition of insanity? Going through this, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But in reality, that same result keeps happening and we're just in a limbo. That's just how I see it, at least. It's just a very disappointing thing to think about. Where there's only a few teams that actually have a shot to win the championship, but everyone else is like, you got to the playoffs. That's the banner you get. Of course, with LeBron going to LA in the Western Conference, the Eastern Conference opens up like a giant budding flower. So there's positives in the Western Conference, or the Eastern Conference, excuse me. But when it comes to the Western Conference, it seems to be staying in the same pace, in the same limbo, like I said before. So with that being said, we'll just move on from anything else that happened. Well, since we're talking about the games yesterday, let's just continue on to that. Rockets beat the Raptors 107-95, another big statement win for the Rockets at least. And they're up in the third place now when it comes to the U.S. Western Conference seeding. And they've been moving up. And the reason they're moving up is just momentum, Like, they've been winning games. They're on a 6-game winning streak. They're exactly tied with Oklahoma City and exactly tied with the Portland Trail Blazers, though. All three of them are 39-25, which really shows how deep this Western Conference and how talented this Western Conference really is. Below the Warriors, of course. And, of course, above them is Denver at number 2, the big surprise of the season so far. But regardless of that, when you're looking into from third place to okay, so we can go from third seed to the 8th seed. We got 3 games apart, roughly. 3.5 games apart. Because the San Antonio Spurs are 36-29 at the 8th seed, and the Houston Rockets in the 3rd seed at this moment are 39-25. So it's not impossible for either the Rockets, the Thunder, or the Blazers to drop into that bottom tier seeding because of how close everybody is. And that's one of the things you got to love about this whole Western Conference is how close and how tight it is going into the end. And so it's all about just who doesn't make mistakes at the end. You need to win games that you like your favorite to win. You need to sometimes make an upset. You need to do this and that. There's just a lot of unpredictability because, like we just showed, any team could beat anybody at any time in theory. Because, like we just said, the Celtics were looking like they were doomed for failure, like losing seeding, losing momentum, and we were like, I saw some people even saying they were going to win 70 games this season. Like, that wasn't far-fetched. So, obviously, that's not happening. But with that being said, like, they're still a good team. This shows that they're still talented. This shows that no one is safe from an upset, even in the predictable NBA. So, with that being said, I still see the Rockets making the playoffs. I still see, if anyone's going to drop between the 3 teams that are tied for that 3rd place seed, and that's Portland, Oklahoma City, and Houston, I got to go with Portland. I see if any team drops, it's probably going to be them in the long run. But, again, I could be wrong. Oklahoma City could drop, but they're looking very good, especially Paul George, who's looking at an MVP-like season. And then there's the Rockets, who have the same MVP-like season going for them with James Harden after another 35-point performance he had yesterday. But again, we'll all see how that all goes down when as the season narrows down to the nitty-gritty. But we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have some more info about the NBA and even some college basketball stuff when we return.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, everyone, to the GSMC basketball podcast. Just finished talking about what happened yesterday. Now, let's get into something a little more interesting, shall we? We are in the moment of history as a streak is over. A streak has ended as the Kansas Jayhawks, for the first time in about 15 years, they will not win their conference. Their Big 12 streak is over. Their 14-year regular season Big 12 title streak is over with last night's loss, to Oklahoma. And they lost to Oklahoma in a pretty disappointing fashion. They lost 81-68, a complete annihilation, which will officially prevent them from earning a share of the conference regular season championship. The team had tied for first place, at least tied for first place in each of the last 14 seasons dating back to 2004 and 2005. And with that, we will probably see nothing like that ever again. 14 straight years of the best, tied for the best record or the best record in one conference. That's how dominant Kansas was. Right now, who is tied for the Big 12 at the moment is Texas Tech and Kansas State. Kind of the last couple of teams you would expect in basketball. Football, maybe not so much, but that just seems a little different when it comes down to basketball. And it is said that, there are some people that are saying, February 3rd, 1959, the day that music died. I believe that was the day that music died. What was that? The death of the day the music died was the February 3rd, 1959 incident where there were a couple of musicians like Buddy Holly and Richie Valens and JP, the Big Popper Richardson, all passed away in a car crash. And then comparing it to this streak dying is kind of so John Rothstein compared it. And that's kind of not the best comparisons, honestly, because that's just wrong. But anyways, we are in the month of March. We're getting closer and closer to March Madness tournament. And this is probably the most exciting time in sports when you think of the 2019 March Madness basketball tournament. And how it starts, well, we always have the first four and all this stuff, but the first games start on March 19th and the 20th, so we still got some ways away. That's when the first four begins. The first and second rounds begin March 21st and March 23rd. It seems to me that maybe we're starting the March Madness a little too late because it doesn't end in March, it ends in April. But, I think that's been a consistency. But don't you think about it? It's called the March Madness. I know it's not actually called March Madness, like the infamous thing. It's just the men's basketball tournament, and it's called the Final Four. And last year, the championship game was in April, but everything else was in March. That makes sense, one thing. But I don't know. Having both the semifinals and the finals, the Final Four games, all happening in April, kind of takes away the March Madness purpose, doesn't it? Am I crazy on that one? And that's just how I see it, at least. I just think maybe it's a little premature. Maybe not premature, but too late, I guess is the right word. I don't know. It just seems to me that when you're looking at it, you shouldn't have games in April for a tournament that is nicknamed March Madness. Am I being too critical on it? Am I being too what's the word I'm looking for? What is the word I'm looking for? Am I being too picky? There it is. Am I being too picky when it comes down to that, the March Madness tournament, and all of it being in March? I don't know, but I could be and I could be not. We'll let the fans decide, or will we? I don't know. Anyways, regarding just the March Madness tournament, as Kansas is not going to win the Pac-12 regular season title, they could still win the tournament and get into there as the best team in the Big 12. And, speaking of disappointing seasons for college teams, one of the biggest disappointments I've seen, and I think one of the biggest drops in recent memory, is the Arizona Wildcats. Because not too long ago, I believe it was last year when DeAndre Ayton was playing, they were the number one AP poll team in the nation at one point. Then they lost 3 straight, but they were still up there. And they were actually some people's favorites to win the tournament last year. And here's the record this year. 17-13. 8-9 in the conference. And they have lost some easy winnable games too, which have been super disappointing in the long run if you're an Arizona fan or an Arizona alum. So I think of that as news because that's like the biggest drop I've seen in college basketball. Just because of the whole this FBI investigation as well doesn't really help the fact that they lost so many scholarships. They lost a lot of 5-star, 4-star recruits. So thanks to this whole FBI debacle, that's where the Arizona Wildcats are at the moment. But with their loss comes everyone else's gain because now we have Nevada coming in. I know they lost the other day, but I'm just using other examples of teams that are really taking control of their destinies, like Purdue and Tennessee and, of course, Virginia Tech and Florida State and Buffalo. Buffalo actually beat Arizona in the tournament last year in the first round, and they're ranked, so shows how much that turned that team around, that program around. So with that being said, and the conference tournaments coming up, and who's going to win those? Because the first one, I believe, starts March 9th, and that's the American East Conference. That starts on the 9th of March. It's Vermont versus Maine, Hartford versus UMass, Lowell, Stony Brook, Binghamton, UMBC, the Maryland-Baltimore County team that beat the number 1 seeded Xavier last year in the first time that's ever happened. That'd be kind of cool if they go back there. But it's one of these things where we're looking at these conference tournaments. And what I love the most about college basketball is the teams that you don't see in football are the teams you see in this tournament. Seton Hall and like I said, Baltimore County was in the tournament, and everyone's like, whoa, who's this team? Chicago, that college in Chicago, Loyola Chicago, went into the final flippin' 4 last year in one of the most unexpected turn of events in recent memory. I think it was one of the most unexpected turns. Loyola Chicago Ramblers, they somehow got to the Final Four. I believe they were ranked number 7 in the what's the word I'm looking for? They were ranked 7th in the tournament. They beat Miami, then they beat Tennessee, they beat Nevada. Actually looking at this is who Chicago beat last year, and looking at those teams now. Miami, I don't believe they're ranked very high or ranked in general. I'm going to make sure that's a fact, though. Miami is not ranked as I see here as of right now. So that win doesn't really mean much as of right now. But they beat Tennessee, Nevada, and Kansas State. Tennessee's number 5 right now, and they were number 1 at one point. Kansas State's fighting for the Big 12, and they're number 18. And then you have Nevada, who was at one point number 5, but kind of lost that in a sense because of the fact they just lost to Utah State. Or not number 5, they were number 12, but they recently just lost to Utah State, so they dropped to number 17. But still, for a team that beat those 3 very talented teams, those 3 ranked teams, and now are going into maybe not even making it this season. Who knows what's going to happen? But you got to take a lot of pride in what Loyola Chicago did and how they are now beating three of the best teams in the nation. That's just a cool story. I mean, if I'm in Loyola Chicago, I'll be very excited. Like, oh, wow, we beat this team, and they're still playing at a high level in nationally ranked teams. But what are you going to do about it? Maybe we'll see them in the tournament. Who knows? We still have a lot of unanswered questions when it comes down to the tournament and when it comes down to March Madness, because we're just getting started in March, folks. We're still getting excited and all looking forward to how that's going to go down. But we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the games that are happening tonight in the NBA. We'll see you right after this.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We're going to be talking about the NBA games that are happening today. We got some interesting ones, definitely. After the big win against the Warriors, the Celtics take on a very tough team in the Sacramento Kings. Yes, they're not in the playoffs, but have you heard that, like what the Warriors have said and other teams have said about the Kings? They're being showed as a serious threat. They're one of the fastest teams in the NBA, some say. So that's going to be a very interesting game, to say the least. And they're only favored by 2 points. So that's actually a pretty big accomplishment for Sacramento, who's coming out of nowhere with their 32-31 record. And this is only their slight speed bump in their next couple of games, because next the Sacramento Kings play the Knicks again. They beat them the other day. And then they go and play the Wizards, another losing team in the Eastern Conference. And then they play the Celtics again in March 14th. So they're going to have an easy schedule somewhat, but they're still going to play some tough teams like the Celtics, so we'll see how they turn up there. Heat and Hornets playing for playoff spots. They're both might not even make it, let's be honest. So that's it. That game is just going to say who's going to get the advantage when it comes down to a seeding, if they're going to manage to steal an 8th seed in the Eastern Conference, because I think that's what they're fighting for at this moment. Mavericks and Wizards both are out of the playoffs. It's just Luka Doncic doing what he does best, and he's been Rookie of the Year candidates and all that good stuff. John Wall, he injured his Achilles. Of course, he's out. That's what doomed the Washington Wizards. And of course, Dwight Howard being out for like 90% of these games. So that just speaks for itself of how the Washington Wizards have done. It's just been very bad luck for a quite period of time. And then moving on to the Timberwolves and Pistons, both fighting for, or I guess the Pistons are the ones fighting for playoffs, for a playoff spot. And the poor Timberwolves, after losing Jimmy Butler, it just seemed like they were lost cause and are in a rebuild mode yet again. And they just need to build more around Karl Anthony Towns to really compete, but they don't have the keys and the tools necessary to really build a team around him. So, I mean, for Cat, I think there's a question of, like, if he wants to win, does he leave Minnesota for better pastures somewhere else where they can get guys around him to build a team around him? I mean, that's a legitimate question. Does anyone see actually the Timberwolves making a run in multiple playoff runs and doing making a run to the Western Conference Finals and maybe making a run to the finals? Like, I don't see it happening. Like, they're in a tough conference. Does Cat need to go somewhere else to compete for championships? I honestly think so. And you could obviously disagree, and I have no problem with that. But I think it's one of those things where you're looking at it and going, regardless of what they have done, getting Andrew Wiggins, who's been kind of a disappointment, all things considered, as the number 1 overall pick compared to Karl Anthony Towns, who's the number 1 overall pick and showing it. It's one of those things where you're looking at it and going, man, it's a bummer for Karl Anthony Towns, such a talented player, being on a team that can't help him win. And obviously you can disagree. And obviously they can surprise me. But what I'm seeing right now from them is I don't see them getting to a spot to win championships. Or, honestly, I don't see it anytime soon either. So I guess it's up to Karl Anthony Towns once, I know he signed a massive deal recently. I mean, let's look at his contract right now, shall we? Karl Anthony Towns contract. I'm looking up on Google right now. Because thank you, Google. And this is all thanks to the website. I'm gonna give a shout out to Sports Track again because of what they have done. They've always gave me great contract moves. He's still on a rookie contract, Karl Anthony Towns is. Okay, this actually is a big deal because his last year is this year. And obviously the club used their exercise their club option this year as well. And he's eligible for the 30% max extension because of the fact he went to an all-third NBA team. I messed this up. His upcoming extension, he was still technically on his rookie deal. But after this season, he's on his extension. 5 years, $158 million. His average yearly is 31. Makes sense. He's not a free agent until 2024. So, he's stuck in Minnesota for a good 5 years, at least. Unless he demands a trade. Which I don't think anyone's going to pick up that contract unless they're desperate for a big-time playmaker like the Knicks or, maybe the Warriors, probably not the Warriors. I'm just trying to think about the teams that can even consider taking that contract. But regardless, I think it's one of those things you're looking at and going, I think if he really wants out, he's got to make everybody miserable. But I think he's a loyal guy, so I think it's going to be one of these things where you're looking at it and going, let's see what he can do. Let's see if he can bring a championship there. But I think 2024, if there goes without playoffs and championships and such, it will be the end of Karl Anthony Towns in Minnesota. Pistons, however, are fighting for a playoff spot. Blake Griffin said he's not very happy with the team's performance. They're like, he's in the playoffs. He's like, we kind of suck still. I'm not quoting him, but getting from his interviews and stuff, it seems like he's still frustrated with the team and how they're performing, even with a 500 record. And it's just a weaker conference, and I think he knows that. So the Pistons are just staying in a playoff spot, and they're going to just keep fighting. Speaking of an Eastern Conference team that's fighting for a playoff spot, the Nets play the Cavaliers. Seems like it's going to be a win for the Nets, as D'Angelo Russell has been revitalized his career in Brooklyn and has been playing at a first-round pick level where he was drafted before. And, he said this, and I think I've said this before too. He says this is the best thing that ever happened to him. And it looks to be true because of the fact, in LA, he was bad. The bottom line is he was just bad in LA. And he needed a change. And that change of scenery, I think that's what people really don't understand when it comes down to it, is that when it comes to a player, if he doesn't do good on one team, does not mean he's not going to do good on the other. And I say that because, D'Angelo Russell is a perfect example. There's probably other examples there I'm not thinking of. Chris Webber is a perfect example. Him leaving the Wizards when he was there to go to the Sacramento Kings in 2002, making him a top player in the NBA. And it's just one of those things in where you're looking at it and going, wow, Maybe it is the Cedary. Maybe it is how this all is going to be going down for a certain player. Like he gets drafted by the wrong team. He gets drafted by the wrong organization. And he gets signed and picked up somewhere else. And if he gets better because he's part of a new environment that he is comfortable with and that is comfortable with him, and it just works out that way. So that's how I see it. I don't see anyone being a draft bust until like they go to another team and seeing if they perform well there. But if they don't perform well in like their second team or third team, wherever you want to put it, or it's like they're a free agent and they select a team they want to play for, then they do poorly, then it gets to a point where you're thinking, oh, maybe they are a draft bust. That's just always my concern when it comes down to this kind of thing. Then we also got the Spurs and Hawks. Trae Young still playing pretty darn well, all things considered, with a weak Hawks team. Spurs just trying to hold on to a playoff spot any way they can in the 8th seed. So everyone else looking in the Western Conference is looking for the Spurs to lose this game, but they might not because of the Spurs. Just with Greg, this just shows how good Greg Popovich is. His team this is probably one of the weakest teams he's ever had, and they're still fighting for a playoff spot. And they weren't even supposed to come close to the playoffs. So if Greg Popovich isn't considered one of the greatest coaches of all time, you're crazy. We also got the Jazz and Pelicans. Jazz fighting for a playoff spot. Like I said before, Pelicans are just it's just like a drama. Watching like this Anthony Davis thing keep going and going. He's going to play. He's not going to play. Make up your mind. I'm sick and tired of this. And then we got to battle the two worst teams in the NBA. Knicks and Suns. Who's worse? One just beat the best team in the Eastern Conference, and the other one is the New York Knicks. Something's got to give here, and it's going to be the fans' patience. Then we have the Nuggets and Lakers. Nuggets are just going to walk. I don't see as soon as the Lakers lose this game, they're out of the playoffs. I'm assuming that's a given. But if they have like a 0.5% chance, I just still don't think there's any chance for that matter. But we're going to take another short break, one last break, and then when we come back, we'll be talking about some games that are happening tomorrow. One game that's happening tomorrow especially. Actually, two games that are happening tomorrow that are pretty important and pretty crucial games. So we'll get right on that when we return.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We're going to finish up the day with two big game previews that are happening tomorrow, which is on the 7th of March, as we have two of the top Eastern Conference teams going at it, and we also have two teams that are exactly tied for a playoff spot looking to see who would gain supremacy. We'll start with the Eastern Conference first, as we have Indiana Pacers versus the Milwaukee Bucks. And with that, we have a team that just lost to the Suns in the Bucks, who are struggling. I mean, they're 0-2 against them, all things considered, and they're 40-14 against everybody else. So maybe they just bad luck against the worst team in the Western Conference. I don't know. That's just how the Bucks are. I guess the Suns are the only ones who know how to beat the Bucks. They have the Bucks number. But regardless, moving on from that, just to this game, Indiana and Milwaukee. Two of the teams you never expected to be top of the Eastern Conference. When you're thinking about the top teams in the Eastern Conference at the beginning of this season, you were thinking Toronto and Boston. Toronto got Kawhi Leonard. I mean, they lost DeMar DeRozan, granted, but they got I hate to say this, but he got a much better player in Kawhi Leonard. I hate to say it because I love DeMar DeRozan. I think he's a great player, but I think Kawhi is just a head and shoulders above him. And with Kyle Lowry still leading that team and a great supporting cast around Kawhi and the addition of Marc Gasol, this team just looks like a team that can win a championship. And this was even before the Marc Gasol trade. People were like, this is the team that I'm picking to win a championship. And then you also had the Boston Celtics, where everyone was like, everyone's healthy. This seems like this is their year. So with that being said, then out of nowhere come the Milwaukee Bucks. And Giannis just comes in like a house of fire and just starts playing the best basketball of his career and arguably better than anyone else in the NBA. You can easily put him as the best player in the NBA. I mean, you can add Harden and you can add others. You can add a Kawhi, obviously. You can add a Harden. You can add a Curry. You can add a Durant. But, Giannis has been just the workhorse when it comes to the Milwaukee Bucks. And just how impressive he is on the boards and just scoring. If he just works on an outside shot, he could be the best player without question in the NBA. But again, he has to be working on that outside shot for the future. That's just how I see it. I think that's how a lot of people see it. If he just works on that outside shot, because the NBA nowadays is you got to get good at the outside shot or you're dead in the water. So, but he's been learning to live in the water with his the strongest inside game in the NBA, arguably, and just crashing those boards every chance he gets. And with those lengthy arms, it's hard to stop him on the glass. So with that being said, with this game between the Pacers and the Bucks are 2.5 games ahead of the Toronto Raptors, 48-16 to their 46-19. They both have lost 2 straight, both the Bucks and the Raptors. Pacers have won their last game, so something's got to give here. If the Pacers win this game, I think they're very proven they can make a run in the playoffs with the team they have, even without Victor Oladipo. But again, this is a good chance for them to prove they can handle with any team in the Eastern Conference. And then a little more interesting, we got the Oklahoma City Thunder versus the Portland Trailblazers. And with the Portland Trailblazers and Oklahoma City Thunder, they are tied exactly with also the Houston Rockets for the 3rd seed in the NBA playoffs in the Western Conference. So this is I wouldn't say must-win game. This is a crucial game for both teams. Whoever loses this kind of loses track and can't really get up to that 3rd seed for a little good bit because there'll be a game back. And, of course, the records against the certain other teams would also put a damper on how they would rank in the standings if it came to a tiebreaker. But you're looking at it, it's in Portland, advantage Portland. But, again, you have Paul George, who's having an MVP-like year. You're having Russell Westbrook, who's still playing in a triple-double level. It's like an In-N-Out burger. But regardless of that, it's going to be is Damian Lillard and that supporting cast of his going to be good enough to stop not one superstar, but 2 superstars in Paul George and Russell Westbrook? I don't know. But if I had to put my money on it, I'd probably pick Oklahoma City, but I'm not counting out Portland by any means. But that should be our show for the day. Thank you so much for joining us again. We have our show next Friday for basketball, but tomorrow is our sports, football, and soccer podcasts. And as always, I'm Jeff Malinoff, and I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.